Good afternoon, Year 2. Today it is Wednesday, the 13th of January, and this afternoon we are going to be doing topic, and in our topic we are going to be focusing on history. So this is our third lesson of topic for the week. So we have started to introduce our topic, the Great Fire of London, and this afternoon our learning objective, we are all going to be able to identify differences and similarities between past and present day. And in a moment, we will be going through a PowerPoint together. So we are now going to start looking at London and comparing it from what it was like in the past to what it is like now in the present. So the learning objective we are going to focus on for this part of the lesson is to identify differences and similarities between past and present day in London. And just before we start, London is our capital city of the country England. So we are now going to start looking through some pictures of London and what it looks like now, and we call that modern London. And when we look through these pictures, I would like you, with your grown-up, to discuss what the houses and buildings look like. Can you talk about what materials they are made from and why you think those buildings have been made out of those materials? We are going to look at London at night time, look at the roads and different forms of transport, and what people's jobs were and what they are now. So here we have a bird's eye view of London. Now, stretching through London, we can see a large river. Can you tell your grown-up what that river is called? That's right, it's called the River Thames. And as you can see, London is a very large city. We've got lots of bridges crossing the River Thames, and we have got lots of different types of buildings. Here we can see a closer picture of some buildings. And I want you to have a look with your grown-up. Can you discuss and see what materials you think the buildings are made out of? I now want you to talk about why you can see some buildings are really tall. Why do you think that is? Here is a picture of London at night time, and we can see it is very bright. We can see lights across the bridges, and all the buildings have their lights on. Here is a picture of a house. I would like you to talk with your grown-up about what materials you can see this house has been made from. And when you have worked out what materials they are, talk about why you think houses in the present are made from these materials. Here is some blocks of flats. So, talk with your grown-up, what material can you see these flats are made out of? And why do you think flats were built rather than houses? Have a discussion with your grown-up. If you need to pause the video for a discussion at any point, then you can do that. So we've now moved on to the transport of London. What can you see here? And what form of transport is this? Has anybody been on one of these types of transports before? Also in London, there is something called the London Underground. This is like an underground train, and it takes people all across London, but it is underground, so you can't see it. Can you discuss with your grown-up any more modes of transport that you know? You might want to make a list of all the transports that you can think of. We're now going to look at London and what it was like in the past. And we're really going to look at what it was like in 1666. Again, I would like you to think about what materials the houses and buildings were made out of and what the transport was like in the past in London. So if you need to pause the video at any point you can. I want you to talk with your grown-up. Why aren't there any photos of London from 1666? Have a discussion about why you think that is. So we have a picture here of London, and it is a 17th century map. Can you spot and name that river? And as you can see, this is from the past. And if you look at a map from the present of London, we would be able to see that the buildings now stretch out a lot further from the River Thames compared to this one. So many more buildings have been built since then. This is a painting of the River Thames in London. Talk with your grown-up. Why do you think this is a painting and not a photograph? Now, the reason in the 17th century there are no photographs is because there were no cameras. Everything you can see had to be hand-drawn, and quite often artists did all the drawings. So this is a drawing of St. Paul's Cathedral. This is a really significant building, and this got burnt down in the Great Fire of London. So the St. Paul's Cathedral that you see today in London is the new cathedral, which was rebuilt after the Great Fire of London. And this is a painting of Samuel Pepys. And we learnt about Samuel Pepys on Monday when we watched that video. And he was a member of Parliament, and he lived in London. And during the Great Fire of London, he kept a very detailed diary, and he wrote in a secret code. He kept his diary from 1660 to 1669, so it was a longer period, and it was over a longer time during the Great Fire of London. And it became a very important source of information, because without his diary, we wouldn't know as much about the Great Fire of London, because we wouldn't have had his diary to read. So children, from now going through our PowerPoint, we are now going to move on to the next part of our lesson, which is to sort pictures from the past and present tense. So we have just finished going through the PowerPoint together, discussing and looking at different images from the past and present of London. So we are now going to move on to the next part of our lesson, which is to sort pictures of the past and present. So as you can see in front of me, I have got different images. Some are from the past, which would be 1666 in the 17th century, and some are from the present, which would be 2021. So your job is to cut all these pictures out, and you have got to sort them on a separate page. I have divided my page into two: past 1666, present 2021. So the first pictures I'm going to look at are these two images here of the buildings and houses. So in this picture here, I can see that the houses are made out of wood and straw. And from all the learning I have done so far this week, I know that the houses made from wood and straw were from the past. So I'm going to stick that picture there. And then looking at this picture here, I can see that this house is made out of brick. And I know houses in the present are made out of brick, so I'm going to put that there. Once I have sorted all of my pictures into past or present, we are then going to move on to the next part of our lesson, which is to write super sentences comparing past and present day. So I'm just going to move this to one side, and I'm going to think about what sentence I could use to write about comparing those two houses and buildings. So I'm going to start by just looking at my strip again. I've got thread fingers, capital letter for my start of sentences and any proper nouns, finger spaces and full stops, and at the end of every sentence I'm going to check that it makes sense. So I'm going to start at the edge of my page, capital letter, in 1666. The houses and buildings. So already I am challenging myself with a conjunction. In 1666, the houses and buildings were made. Now I'm going to thread talk this spelling made. M-A-D. It's A, make a cake. Were made out of wood and straw. However, so I'm now using another conjunction, but I am going to compare. However, nowadays, they are made out of stronger materials such as, and I'm going to make a list now of the different materials that buildings are made out of in the present, such as brick, and when I'm making a list I need to use a comma, glass and metal. And I'm going to put a full stop at the end of my sentence, and now I'm going to check it to make sure it makes sense. In 1666, the houses and buildings were made out of wood and straw. However, nowadays they are made out of stronger materials such as brick, glass and metal. Your job now, year 2, is you are going to first of all sort all of your pictures into past and present, and then you are going to write your sentences comparing, just like I have done there. Good luck, children, and me, Miss Ford and Miss McGrath, can't wait to see your comparison sentences of the past and present day.